What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Active Self-Protection Extra. I am Christopher Bean with Tactical Advantage, and today we're going to talk about timers.
Today's video is brought to us by Mantis. The Mantis family of products is integral to ASP staff building handgun and carbine skills and are your most economical and fastest path to improvement in your skills too. Whether you choose the X10, the Laser Academy, the Blackbeard, or use them all in concert, they will help your practice be more effective, efficient, and fun. Go check them out, pick up a unit, and thank them for sponsoring today's video.
So I've been thinking for a while about how to make a video to discuss like timers, and not so much what timers are good, what timers are bad, but more about the relationship with the practitioner and their timer. And one thing I've kind of noticed is there's like this unhealthy relationship with timers where people do things when they're under time that they wouldn't normally do. And I think a bunch of that is kind of generated in practice where they're using this device as like a metric to say whether something's good and or bad versus basically a tape measure. You know, all the timer does is measure time. What you're doing within that time period is kind of separate from that. But we treat it as the repetition is either good or bad because or how it relates to the timer. I kind of find that interesting because I believe it creates this situation where someone performs poorly because of how they're practicing with a timer. So if you've ever kind of gone to shoot somewhere or in a class or anything like that, and the timer goes off, and you find you're doing something different than what you would normally do, I think you can trace that back to how you practice. So I think what happens quite often is people set unrealistic expectations on their timer and they abandon all technique because the timer says it needs to be done in this duration of time. Which isn't really productive from a skills development standpoint. I think what's better used is understanding the technique and then using the technique or modifying the technique to slowly find the happy place with the time. So if we just look right here, there's a 2-second par on this device right now. It's a CED 7000 from Competition Electronics. So 2 seconds, easy day. So if we look from a draw perspective, what people more often than not do is they'll set themselves like a 1-second par and they'll do all sorts of wonky things to kind of meet that 1 second versus trying to utilize something known to them like a 2-second, slowing everything down and paying attention to the repetition. So if we go again with like a 2-second, so easy and clean, right? And for some reason, that's not glamorous to people, right? But what'll inevitably happen is when they go to like a 1-second par, it'll look completely different. So for me, I want to try and show you guys that the draw is the same, just maybe a little bit more expedient. One more time. Got a little bit hung up there, so let's fix that. So what I'll see a lot of times when I'm analyzing video is the timer creates this kind of action from people. Because they're trying to get something done in a time period without applying the technique to that piece of time. And I know this is kind of a headier thing to think about, but If you really slowly kind of work your way into it, what you'll see is bigger gains than trying to force your current technique into a smaller span of time. The point is to create efficiency and ways to work that allow whatever task or action to happen in a shorter period of time. Not jump to a period of time that you don't currently have the understanding on how to mold the technique to fit. So the technique is just abandoned. So really that's the whole point I'm trying to make, is understand the difference, and should there be a difference between like a 2, we'll just do this for fun, like a 2-second par, one more time. So let's try a 1.5 second par. And really what we're hoping for is to see very little variance in the technique. Stop using the timer to validate if you're doing something right, and use the timer just to measure the amount of time. That was a little bit quicker than it needed to be. So we're gonna kind of just throttle that just a little bit. Good. Good. All right. So now we'll go back down to 1 again. And I'm going to make a separate video talking about descending pars. But really, and I try and do this like once or twice a week, just differing times to evaluate, is my technique similar or congruent. That way you know you're not throwing too much body at something or too much effort as you try and go quicker and or slower as the shooting variable changes. So now we're at 1. So not trying any harder, just being a little bit more expedient. And I'm not using the timer to validate the task. The timer's there just to give me a known span of time to kind of work within, not telling me if that rep was good and or bad. My sights tell me that. My trigger press tells me that, not the black box. So these are kind of interesting things to kind of think about that will kind of change the way you train. Because if you're always consistently looking for the timer to validate your work, what you'll find is there will be repetitions that will be tossed out because you did not make a given par time or something like that. But all the data that repetition can give you was now discarded as well. So you start losing valuable information because you're so worried about a par time and not the technical aspect of what you're trying to do. So hopefully this is helpful. I know some of these things are harder to kind of grasp when you hear them, but as you work in your practice and you start playing with these ideas, you start understanding the philosophy behind it, and you'll start noticing things about your shooting or your technique that you didn't notice before, because now you're evaluating everything and using the timer simply as a measurement device, not a validation device. So hopefully that helps. Next video, we're going to talk about descending pars and how to generate speed without abandoning technique. So that'll be the next one. So thanks, guys. See you next time.